All right, y'all. Welcome to the show here for this Tuesday, August 11th, 2026. Of course, we are high atop Jacksonville, Florida, a hot Jacksonville, Florida. Feels like a blast furnace outside, but luckily we're in here in the cold, well, not cold necessarily, but cooler-ish studio here. But yeah, it's going to be like it was a few weeks ago. If you remember, if you've been a loyal member of the show or subscriber to the show, mentioned a few weeks ago that here in this part of the country, it was like temperatures were going to be near 100. To meet that yet again, so cannot wait for that. Anyway, of course, this is the Four Verticals podcast, episode 201. Now we're in the 200s. Now we had our 200th show. Was it back on Thursday? So we're now in the 200s now. So we're moving right along here in the episode numbers here. But anyway, a lot of things to discuss here. Fall camp intel. Several teams you haven't covered yet that we will be discussing here. Varying degrees of good and bad news. We have our first segment of what's going to be a number of segments of conference picks. So as we are getting closer and closer to the season, we are going to be doing conference picks for the conference titles. Just what's going to be the surprise team, and each conference, the four major ones. We're not doing the rest of the conferences like the Pac-12 and the G5. So unfortunately for those folks, we'll be doing them as we'll be here all the way past week one. So we're not going to do that. We're only going to do the P4. So first up is, of course, the ACC. We'll be doing them, the weakest of the four. Probably still we'll be doing them. We'll go through all the information you need to know about conference in general, just the 10,000 foot perspective version of it, getting that specific, if you will. Then we'll talk about college ball expansion. It happened yesterday. Well, these talks happened yesterday, and we'll discuss what happened there. And of course, the insanity that is, expanding a playoff that was, I thought, perfectly fine at four teams, but because of college football being treated like an ATM, right? Got to put off all that money. You got to make sure you keep the thing going, and you grow horizontally. You don't grow the opposite direction. It is horizontal growth, but you don't go down, you go up. So there's that. If you're new here, first of all, welcome in to the show. We do this show twice a week live, 2 times a week live. Tuesdays and Thursdays here on YouTube, and of course this will go on to Spotify a day or so afterwards for those folks. This is mainly a YouTube show, so be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I would highly advise you do that. Don't have to turn on notifications. I don't have to do any of that type of stuff. I don't do that personally for myself, for any of the shows I subscribe to or any of the channels I subscribe to. So you don't have to do that for us here. This show's completely free of charge. This isn't behind a paywall. I wouldn't put this behind like a Patreon page or anything like that. This show, all this info we're giving you guys, all the personal opinions, things like that, all that is completely free of charge. So you don't have to worry about anything in terms of paying us money. If you want to, that's totally up to you. I'm not suggesting you should. Personally, I don't really do that, but anyway. But yeah, we do this show twice a week, cover college football. So if you're a big college football fan, subscribe to the channel. Okay. If you're a YouTube viewer, even if you're a returning viewer, make sure you're subscribed. Double check, and be sure to get any of your friends, people who are big college football fans. Tell them, subscribe to the channel. Tell them about the show. We're not the oldest show around. We haven't been doing this for very long, but I think if we're above 200 shows now, I'm not say we're veterans of the business, but we're getting we have experience now. We have multiple years now of doing this. So be sure to again subscribe to the YouTube channel, podcast feed on Spotify, follow us on Instagram, X, Twitter. Follow us over there for more or less. We're more active on Twitter than we are on Instagram, to be fair. But who knows? Maybe on the Instagram page, we'll be posting more over there as well. Who knows? Anyway, enough of the boilerplate stuff. I think most of you are returning viewers. You mostly know all that type of stuff. So let's go ahead and jump right in skis, okay? Fall camp intel. We've already touched on a number of teams already now since the weekend. A lot of camps have opened up, especially for the teams who are not playing on week 0. So for the week 0 teams, you've been in camp for about, I think, 2 weeks now, probably, which is kind of crazy to think about. But for everyone else, you've already started. There's some good, there's some bad news with the 3 teams we are choosing to talk about today. So Clemson, the biggest thing to emphasize is that they still have a lot to figure out before they play LSU. I think that's kind of obvious, with a lot of the turnover they've had, a lot of the, you know, players that were drafted in last year's draft. And remember, even though the team went, the season went the direction it did last year, this was still a talented team, okay? Like them being in the top 10 last year in the preseason, that wasn't by accident. I think a lot of folks, in a lot of sense, looked at Clemson's talent and also saw that, look, they play in the ACC, which is one of the more, not even that. They are the weakest. They are by far the weakest conference in college football, right? Despite the fact that Miami played for the national title last year, right? The thing people saw last year for Clemson is that, okay, Clemson has a lot of talent coming in. They bring back Kate Klubnik, and it's another year under Garrett Riley again. And the offense still failed. Now, a lot of folks have thought about this ever since last year ended with Garrett Riley being, did he get fired or just resign? I think he got fired when he was let go. A lot of folks have slowly started to realize, and this was probably the case, or I think a lot of folks started to realize this even like long before this happened, that they were not necessarily running the Garrett Riley offense when he was at Clemson. They were still basically running the Dabo Swinney old, spread offense they've been running there since 2011, right? It may have worked for, Clemson and certain teams back in, the early 2010s, but in the 2020s, late 2020s now, that ain't the case anymore. I think a lot of folks have figured out the Clemson offense, even though with all this talent that they've, tried to improve certain aspects of the team. It just, the offense feels pretty stale, and it felt stale even with Garrett Riley again because Garrett Riley was not running his stuff. They were running the Clemson offense, and they bring in Chad Morris. Really emphasizing the running that style of offense because he was the guy that basically created the Clemson offense, sort of part of that brain trust there with him and Jeff Scott and Tony Elliott. So those three were really, part of that. And unfortunately for Clemson fans, I don't personally see the offense changing that much, at least stylistically. Could they add in some new wrinkles here and there and some other new formations, new trick plays and whatnot? And they sure could, but unfortunately, again, given that Clemson is still literally running an offense that is stuck in the late 2000s, early 2010s, I think a lot of defensive coordinators, new and old, are pretty aware of what the Clemson offense is, and it's not going to change that much, even with the personnel being new. And yes, they have upgraded at receiver. They did run the ball last year, but reports coming out of the spring practice indicated that they were able to run the football a lot better. So take that for what it's worth. But they still have a lot of things they need to figure out. And one of them, particularly one of those positions, is, of course, quarterback. There is a quarterback battle there. A lot of folks thought that was going to be Chris Vizina, who has been there for a number of years. And like I said before, a lot of folks weren't really over the moon about him, at least in the recruiting world. So people like Bud Elliott over at 247 is very critical of at least him as a player. Probably should not have been rated a 4-star, but kind of whatever. Now he's there, and he's on the team, right? So a lot of folks, even with the the cautiousness around Vizina and his ability to play, and granted, he came in at times last year when Klubnik was down, and he performed okay. But he hasn't started a full year yet. It's a little bit different when you're the backup quarterback versus being the starter. Coming from someone who didn't even play high school football, I did track and cross country, so different, more or less not a sport, but as it's basically an activity. But anyway, so what I say all that to say, a lot of folks thought that Vizina was going to get the starting job. He was going to lock it down, and coming out of spring, there wasn't going to be this whole mystery of, well, we still don't know who the Clemson quarterback is, and lo and behold, we still don't know who the Clemson quarterback is. We think it's going to be Chris Vizina, but then there's the other sort of, little thing that sort of happened here is that they have Tate Reynolds, who is a freshman quarterback, dual threat guy, and I think Vizina is also technically a dual threat, I believe. So there's kind of the battle here. It's between him and Tate Reynolds. To me, I would still lean Vizina because he has experience with running the Clemson offense. Tate's a lot younger, but it could be a scenario here, and a lot of folks brought this up with Clemson. It could be a scenario there where Dabo's done this before, where you start the veteran guy beforehand, but then you eventually bring in the younger guy who maybe has a little bit more talent than the veteran guy, and he ends up performing a lot better. he's done this twice in his career, at least in a major way. First one was, of course, the early Deshaun Watson years in 2014. They started out with what's his name, Cold Stout or whatever. I think his dad played in the NFL. I think with the Bills or something like that. So Stout started the year in 2014, and eventually they transitioned to Deshaun taking over, and eventually it ended up working for them. And it also happened with Kelly Bryant to Trevor Lawrence. Remember in 2018, Trevor Lawrence didn't start the first few games of the year. It was Kelly Bryant. Yes, he saw Trevor come in, and I believe famously he came in that Texas A&M game on the road, and he threw the only play he came in and actually was quarterback for was that like long touchdown pass to T. Higgins or whatever in that game against Texas A&M on the road. So Dabo's done this before, where again he's taking the veteran guy, he's let him kind of take care of the offense for a little bit, and eventually the younger, much more talented player steps in, and eventually things end up working out. So that's the best case scenario. That this is just Dabo kind of going, well, we could start the younger guy, Tay Reynolds, and look, I think truly this is unfortunately, I think for some folks, mainly Clemson fans, this is a quarterback battle. So again, there is real uncertainty here, but it can also be part of, I don't know, Dabo's potential diabolical plan here, where he can go, we could start Tay Reynolds, but let's just roll out Chris, right? He's been with us for a while. I know him a lot more than I do Tay Reynolds. It makes sense as he's been Vizina's been with the program a lot longer, right? So you roll him out to a varying degree. He could suck. He could actually be pretty good, but eventually you kind of transition, and you could make a convenient excuse saying, oh, Vizina's injured or he's tired or whatever, or I don't know, make up some bullshit excuse. Then you bring in Tay Reynolds. So what I'm trying to say here is that I believe Tay Reynolds will eventually be the starter for Clemson. Potentially. But I think what the plan could be, this diabolical plan, is that they're going to do what they've done in the past, roll the veteran, then they bring in the younger guys to come in. I know it kind of bothers people that teams do that, but you have to understand that even if Vizina balls out, there's no guarantee, again, given how certain coaches do this, right? Mainly with Dabo, it's not a guarantee he'll keep it, right? And again, I go back to 2018, right? With Kelly Bryant. When he was there taking over for Deshaun, again, it was, he was doing okay, but, it just, when you bring in Trevor Lawrence and someone who has that high profile of a recruit, not saying Tay Reynolds is that, he's obviously not. He was much like Vizina, a 4-star player. But again, the upside here with Tay Reynolds is a lot higher because he's even more of a dual threat guy. He can run around, and again, since they are still running the 2011 Clemson offense, you kind of need a running quarterback to be successful here. I think, unfortunately, for those who wanted stability, you're not going to get that, but you will, I guess, eventually get it with Tay Reynolds. So again, it's kind of one of these weird things where you leave spring feeling pretty good about Chris Vizina, but then Dabo proceeds to not name the starter, and then you go through the summer, and now it really is an actual quarterback battle. So go figure. I guess, whatever floats your boat, I guess, if you're Dabo. But it's kind of interesting because, like I mentioned before, this Clemson team could sneakily be good, right? They still, at least to my extent, at least with the players they still have, they're still somewhat talented on defense. They still have a lot of faith in a guy like Tom Allen, who was the defensive coordinator there. So, and defense wasn't always the issue last year, right? It was mostly the offense, kind of, right? So, who knows? Maybe something wonderful can happen there in Clemson, South Carolina this year, or it could not. The choice is really theirs. We'll talk about the ACC again here in a little bit, in a few minutes, actually. USC. So, oh boy. So, Kalen O'Connor was going to be USC starting center on that offensive line, and that was kind of the thing a lot of folks are banking on for that offensive line to be kind of stabilized and whatnot. Well, he is now hurt, and he is no longer going to play. He got hurt. This news broke, what was it, Thursday or Friday of last week, towards the end of last week, going into the weekend. So he's donezo. He has barbecue chicken, not literally barbecue chicken, but metaphorically he is. He's done for the year, and he will not be playing for them, which is a shame, again, because this is a year that, again, I've used this, analog before, but I'll say it again. This year for USC is a lot like Auburn in 2017 with Malzahn, right? With the number of years building up, recruiting classes stacking up, everyone's kind of circling this year as the year for USC to have a big year with experience at quarterback. Yes, a lot of the talent's still young, but it's, it's high quality talent. I mean, they just signed the #1 recruiting class in the country. I mean, gee whiz. So you lose O'Connor, that's not good. You also have Mayava coming back, who, last year and year before struggled with turnovers, had, double-digit turnover seasons there. Hopefully he keeps that down a little bit, but losing O'Connor is kind of a big deal here. I mean, he was the guy that they were going to be relying on center, has a lot of experience. So that one's going to be a huge miss for them. It'll be interesting to see how much change is going to happen there with the offensive line. Again, USC plays week 0. They don't play Notre Dame because they, for some reason, certain folks within both universities decided to cancel that series briefly, and it's coming back, but won't be until a couple years from now. But anyway, they play week 0, I believe, against New Mexico State or something like that, San Jose State. Who really knows? Well, I should know, but it's one of those things where it's like you don't really, they play a G5 team. So I'm trying to say here. So we'll see what the offensive line looks like there. Hopefully they can get things figured out, but it doesn't really exude a lot of confidence, if you will, what I'm trying to say here. So I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully, again, something amazing can happen there. Maybe the offensive line isn't going to be a frailty for them, but it's not a guarantee. Again, losing someone like that is not something you should totally discard. That is a bit of a thing here. So that's something we'll be monitoring here up until they kick it off here in a couple weeks, or actually, I think next week, actually. So, or not next week, or the week after that. Same idea. Anyway, moving right along here. Last team we'll talk about today, Texas A&M. A lot of early reports are encouraging, which is good based on what I can tell, particularly of Marcel Reed. Again, I know a lot of folks still kind of look at Marcel Reed as, okay, he's a cool, nice, efficient college quarterback to the extent extent, mainly of his running ability. Him throwing the football, it's okay. Wouldn't trust him in a big game, probably. At least that's what some folks say. I still have a lot of faith in him. I know they lose their offensive coordinator. Colin Klein is at his alma mater, Kansas State now. So it'll be interesting to see what that kind of looks like here. Is the offense going to regress a little bit? Is this going to be like, if you want to use a pro football analogy here, sort of what happened with, my Tampa Buccaneers after they lost Liam Cohen to Jacksonville when he went up here to Jacksonville. You lose him last year. The offense at times sputtered, and even though it was more the defensive, but still, that's kind of the fear here is it going to be a situation of, okay, defensive-minded coach loses a rock star OC, things kind of go the opposite direction and whatnot, and things end up going, pretty poorly. They don't score enough points. The offense looks more clunky than it did last year. Kind of, that's totally going the route of like a Will Muschamp coach team and that type of offense they're running with freaking Brent Pease at one point, who was a stupid offensive coordinator. I don't think it's going to be Texas A&M. I think Mike Elko is obviously not a Muschamp clone, but losing a key offensive coordinator there, a high-profile name, that's going to hurt a little bit. So it is encouraging to hear that, the offense is going to be about probably the same as last year. Wide receiver room, obviously, there's a lot of people to replace, but they have talent there. The offensive line is still a massive question mark. They've lost a lot of starters. They've lost players from last year's team. Obviously, a lot of them have moved on. So that's a big if there on the offensive line. And also defense, too. They're still dealing with injuries, I believe, going back in the spring. I think at linebacker as well. So A&M kind of, a mixed bag there. USC mainly worrisome there at the center. Clemson's really going to be that quarterback battle with Vizina and Reynolds. They're trying to see how that really plays out. But I really don't know with USC in terms of how much of an impact that's really going to have here. Is it going to be, is it going to be like a big deal, a small deal? Who really knows here? But, I think, Lincoln Riley's been doing this for a while. So I think they can be able to work it out somehow, some way. They'll be able to science their way out of it, hopefully. Okay, let's some water real quick here. As again, like I mentioned, it's like 1,000,000,000 degrees outside. I have my fan blowing on me, so to make sure things are extra cool. But gotta make sure you hydrate, guys. I can make sure you do that. So get some water real quick. We'll be moving merrily along here with the show. We have ACC Conference Picks, and again, we'll talk about good old college football expansion. Can't wait. By the way, here, I don't know what actually happened here. So with Spotify, a little behind the scenes here. With Spotify, the way we record the show, obviously it's a different system we use for YouTube and Spotify, two different things we use. But for Spotify, sometimes what happens with Spotify is that if I turn my volume down on my computer, if I had it down beforehand, I forgot to turn it up. Sometimes the recording on for the Spotify with the system we use for the recording for that, sometimes it doesn't always pick it up. And I think what happened was my volume was down. So it looks like it's recording. So who knows? Maybe it's actually going to do it this time and not screw it up. But I just had to fix that here as I was doing that last segment. Because I was like, is my volume down or something? Is there something I'm missing? But who knows? This is one of the things of running a show like this. You have a lot of the setup here, and we'll move on. My laptop's right here. That's where I have my notes, and that's where we're recording with the Spotify side of things. And then we have my iPad, which is the camera, where the microphone's connected to for YouTube and whatnot. So that's what we're doing that. So it's a very complex, operation here, but we get it done somehow. Okay, speaking of getting things done, we are going to move on to the ACC, which has not got it done recently, and recent big time college football. Of course, they're one of the weakest conferences in the sport overall. Definitely the weakest at the P4, but we still love them. We still love the ACC, even though it's changed a whole lot, and it may not be around much longer, but nothing we could do about it for college. As college football fans in general, we can't really change the future of the conference, but we can watch it, all together and whatnot. So anyway, so ACC Conference Picks here. Again, we are starting this new little segment. Of course, we're done with the team record projections. For the most part, we'll bring it back for the Buccaneers. We'll do them since that's a team we follow here on the show. We'll do them at some point, but we're going to do them down the road. But we are going to do, hopefully I didn't say do twice here. But anyway, let's pull up the graphic here and go on and talk about the ACC here. Okay. So the ACC Conference Picks. Again, we'll be doing this for all the Power 4 conferences. So we'll do the Big 12 and the SEC and the Big 10 eventually. Not necessarily that order. Who knows? But if you're listening on Spotify, you can't see this graphic here, but on YouTube you can. So luckily you can see it. But if you're on Spotify, too bad, I guess. You can listen to it. So my picks for the ACC. Again, we've done several of these record projections. That's not really a factor here. This is kind of a little bit of a different thing here than that. But we are going to start out with the top 3 teams in the conference, right? So basically the 2 teams I think will be in the conference championship game and the team that gets left out. The 2 teams I believe will be in Charlotte. And by the way, this year it will not be a night game in Charlotte. It will be at noon on that Saturday on conference championship weekend. Miami will be there. And I think that one's pretty easy to see, right? Mario Cristobal, number of years building up this program on top of, having really good recruiting classes. They've finally gone quarterback right multiple times. Cam Ward, last year they had Carson Beck, and now you have Darian Mensah, along with other transfer pieces. We still have some decent pieces there that have been from recruiting, in-house recruiting. So Miami being there, no shocker. They should be there. The team they will face in the ACC championship game will be Louisville with Jeff Brom and Lincoln Kleinholtz at quarterback. That one's interesting. I think for a lot of folks, again, with the ACC being kind of what it is, it's really like Miami. Then there's just this massive, gulf or like Grand Canyon. And then there's the rest of the pack, right? I think Louisville could be up here. They have a very workable schedule. They have a coach in Jeff Brom who I respect a whole lot. Well, not a whole lot of folks respect him, but that's okay. I think you'd prefer that. Him being more anonymous, I guess, in the world of college football, at least to the general public, the sickos and people who really follow the sport. We know who Jeff Brom is. Not him personally, but we know him as a football coach, and we've watched him over the years going back to Purdue, right? So I expect Louisville to be there. The team that gets left out here is SMU, the team that I think most folks are going to be picking to go to Charlotte. I don't know. Look, I like Brett Lashley. I like their quarterback situation with Kevin Jennings being back for another year. Defensively, though, I don't know. I think that's going to be the issue for them, and I think that could be the reason why they end up losing certain games, and they could potentially fall off here a little bit. But they do also have a workable schedule. But again, with that being the case, there's also the potential of them losing a game or two. Same thing with Miami. It's not a guarantee they'll go undefeated, but more likely than the others because they are the most talented team. And then there's everyone else. So again, the top three teams in ACC, the two teams I believe will be playing for the ACC championship game are Miami and Louisville. The team that gets left out, barely gets left out, is SMU. The surprise team in the ACC. Now, I know a lot of folks are going to say probably some version, or at least, they'll have different teams, right? Some folks will probably say Pitt. Others will say Clemson. I debated on Clemson, but as you can tell here on YouTube, I'm going with someone else. Other folks have brought up Cal with JKS, the quarterback there. I'm not going to say his entire name because I don't have time for that right now. But before the season starts, I will try to now learn how to pronounce it. Sort of like when we were trying to pronounce Tua Tagovailoa and Nico Iamaleava. But JKS, we'll just do that. And Cal with Taj Lupoy being the new head coach there. That's obviously going to be a very trendy team, right? They probably, besides Darian Mensah, they have probably the best quarterback in the ACC, or one of them. Him and CJ Bailey, who I have here on YouTube, on the graphic here. My surprise team's NC State. Their schedule, very workable. They also have CJ Bailey back. I trust Dave Dorn. I'm not saying they're going to go to the ACC championship game. I'm not saying that, okay? I'm not saying that they're going to, make a playoff run or something stupid like that. No, but do I think this team could be like a 9-win team, or maybe like a 10-win team? But they're not going to but it wouldn't be a college football playoff team because obviously their schedule is way too weak and other circumstances there, for the conference being what it is. Yeah, I mean, I would pull up the schedule here, but I have it on my other screen here. I'll just read it off. They start out with Virginia. Remember, that game was supposed to be in Brazil, but due to multiple circumstances, probably because of the energy crisis we're going through right now, or what we're about to go through, they've decided to move the game to Charlottesville. So it's on the road. It's an early conference game. So you play Virginia on the road. That's obviously going to be not like a guarantee win, but you should probably, at least in my opinion, win that game. Obviously, we'll predict that game. John Rowe, by the way, that is a week 0 game, by the way. So those of you who are wondering, then they have a bye week. Again, remember, they're supposed to be traveling overseas, so they have an extra bye week here. Then they play an FCS team at Vanderbilt in Nashville. Not easy. And I go ask Virginia Tech a number of years ago, who I infamously thought was going to be a surprise team in the ACC, and they ended up losing to Vanderbilt. So don't let that be you, NC State. I'm trusting you guys. Then they go back and play they can't play themselves. They play App State. They do play Louisville. That's a huge game to circle there if you're going to, and like for people like me who think Louisville is going to make it to the ACC championship game. This is a huge game to circle here for Louisville. I believe they also play SMU as well. So in this universe, or at least in this projection here, this pick here, I am picking Louisville to beat SMU in head-to-head. But this is also another crucial game for Louisville. And it's also at Carter Finley Stadium. It's a home game for NC State. So that's, as people say, NC State is one of those places where you really, it's not a guarantee you'll win there if you go on the road. But so you have them at home. If you're NC State, you get Wake Forest at Stanford. You should probably win those games. Cal at home. You're lucky if it was the other way around and you're going on the road to Berkeley. And then towards the bottom here, you have Duke and Syracuse. You should beat them. But the bottom here is interesting. Again, I would show this on YouTube, but we have the graphic up. Yeah, Florida State and North Carolina back-to-back on the road. Now, in most years, maybe if you go back like 10, 15 years ago, that would be extremely difficult for NC State. But not anymore, right? Given the current state of North Carolina and Florida State, respectively, right? And there's also a non-zero chance that you're going to probably be having interim coaches for both of those teams. I think the most obvious one here is North Carolina. I don't expect Bill Belichick to be back after this year. Mike Norvell, same thing. It's a non-zero chance he is not there. And it's probably Tom Herman, who, by the way, yes, the one Thomas Herman, the former head coach of Texas and Houston before that, is on the Florida State coaching staff. So that's kind of the rumor here in terms of if there is an interim coach, that's probably going to be the interim coach, Mr. Tom Herman. So could be him, and then who knows who's going to be UNC's interim coach, probably Bobby Petrino, I would assume, which is kind of interesting. 2 years in a row for Mr. Petrino being an interim coach. Anyway, so yeah, what I'm trying to say here, kind of a long way of saying, I think NC State, because of the schedule, CJ Bailey being back, he could have very easily gone to the portal. I think a lot of folks expected him to leave after last year, but he ended up staying, which is good for the folks in Raleigh. So again, ACC title game, Miami Louisville. I'm picking Miami to beat Louisville, and do they get a first round bye in the playoff? I don't think so. Given the ACC's perception here, I think look, we'll do our playoff projections soon, probably by next week. But that's the ACC. That's the whole enchilada for them. Could be wrong on some of these, but who knows? It could end up working out where NC State is a surprise team, and I look like a genius. And again, remember last year I picked Florida State to be a surprise team. Now, great, I'll give myself some credit here a little bit. It was looking good the first few weeks, right after they beat Bama and they're undefeated going into that game against Virginia. I was looking pretty smart. I was like, hey, how about this? Everyone else is like Florida State, and here I was, around this time last year thinking, I think Florida State could be a surprise team. They started out good. The finish wasn't, the ride, kind of got, scary there for a while, and I think we all saw what happened. But anyway, moving right along here, I'm going to get one more drink of water and we'll wrap up the show. How about that? We're going to have about a way less than 50 minutes here, about 31 minutes in here on the show. How about that? College football expansion talk. So there was a meeting, I believe somewhere, maybe in Dallas probably, but there was a meeting yesterday about CFP expansion. A lot of folks were talking about this, sort of under the radar a little bit. And then, of course, Josh Payne on his show brought it up as though sort of spreading awareness for it. Also brought up, which was eventually reported yesterday, that there was this 20-team playoff being mentioned. I was going to get tossed around, and other models have been proposed. So that happened yesterday. Talk stalled, thankfully. But it could mean in multiple different things. And the most likely scenario here is that the talk stalled because they're just kicking the can down the road to kind of, buy some time. And that really distracts from the season starting up. And, who wants that? Or who wants playoff expansion talk in the middle of us talking about, college football, right? So I guess it's kind of a blessing and a curse here. It's a curse that, yes, there's no clear clarity yet in terms of what the college football playoff will look like in the future. Because again, remember, I believe the current contract has expired, right? It's kind of a yearly basis now with the 12-team playoff. It was only a 2-year thing, and the 2 years are now up. So it's going to be, who knows what we're doing next year. But so that's, in a sense, it's good that we're not having this talk really, be a distraction for the season. But it's also not good that there was no clarity yet in terms of what the path forward is going to look like. And like I said before, I'm going to say it again. The only thing that is driving this thing, college football playoff expansion, is the folks who run this sport. And they do not have the best intentions, right? You have like the TV oligarchs, the Mongols who run all the networks. They are more or less on board on this. Clearly, I think the folks over at Disney, of course, are advocating for this. Clearly, because again, they do own the rights to the broadcast and whatnot. And look, this would be the case for any of these networks, whether it's Fox, CBS, NBC, I don't know, Amazon, Netflix. They would obviously probably want college football expansion, which is not taking into account what the fans want. What the fans want, what we want, is just stability, fun, urgency, college football, right? And the craziness of it. Having all of this college football, and look, this is an exhaustive topic that we've done over, if you've been watching the show for a long time, you know my stance on it. I don't want expansion. I even wanted it to still be at 4 teams. I'm like, again, I get it, unpopular opinion. But I was okay with 4 teams. I like the urgency. I like the fact that there was no parachute to save. There was no safety net. There was no, mechanisms built in to, prevent, certain, teams to follow the playoff race after Halloween. So I kind of enjoyed the whole urgency of, man, better make sure you limit all your games or else you're going to be left out, more than likely, especially if you're in the P4, especially in the G5. And, there was only one team that got in, which was, of course, Cincinnati back in 2021. But so obviously, yes, I was not a big advocate for this at all. I was not an advocate, period. Again, I wanted it to stay at 4 teams. I was even against 12-team playoff. But, as they say, when you're renovating a skyscraper, you can't destroy it. You can only go up. You can't go down. You can only go up. And again, it's the vertical or a horizontal expansion here. So it can only go up. It's a one-way ticket here. You can't go down because why would you do that? You'll lose money. So again, like I mentioned, again, the folks who are driving this, they have no good intentions. They have clearly alternative motives. All they want is, generational wealth, money for themselves, and for them to be the heroes of college football, even though everything they're doing is not taking anything to account of the fans and what they want. And again, like I've said before, whether it's EA Sports and what they did with the whole microtransactions thing, with the video game, or this, the way college football is operating and the way the TV Mongols and the oligarchs and the folks who really don't care and just treat the sport as an ATM, they're doing to college football what ended up happening to NASCAR. And like I said before, and I'll say it again, how many folks do you know in your life are vivid NASCAR fans? Says someone who went to the NASCAR Hall of Fame back a few months ago, which, by the way, I would recommend anyone, even if you're not a NASCAR fan, at least go to. It's kind of cool to go to the exhibits and whatnot and see the history and stuff. But yeah, I'm not even a big NASCAR fan. I understand it, to a certain extent. I respect it, but it's not a sport I follow religiously. But anyway, like I said, do you really see anyone who's a really big NASCAR fan? At least nowadays, maybe a little bit different in like the late '90s and early 2000s, but beyond that, not anymore. And again, much like what's happening to college football, those folks kind of ruined NASCAR, and they've sort of, driven away those fans literally and figuratively. But that's the direction the sport's headed here, based on the fact that we have the oligarchs are screwing it up, the TV Mongols are screwing it up. They don't care about the intentions of, at least they don't care about what the fans want. They only care what they want. And there were certain things that Josh Pay brought up on this show on Sunday as his segment, as sort of being another warning about where this is headed. He showed several of the clips that were circulating back a month ago from Tony Petiti, who comes from that world, a former TV Mongol himself. Talking about how, playoff expansion is so great and it's going to give us more games and whatnot. And I don't know, it's just all BS and crap, really. And I think really, truly, a lot of that stuff is all noise. I think the real problem is that these folks in charge of the sport, who are running the sport, again, the TV Mongols, the oligarchs, only want this because college football is an ATM and it's convenient. And for the longest time, no one was touching it. These guys were, these same people we talk about, the oligarchs, they've had their hands on all these other sports. So if it's NASCAR, the NFL, and the NBA, PGA, water polo, I don't know, running, probably, to a certain extent, track and field, baseball, clearly. But no one's touched college football. And again, with the college football playoff and, it becoming even more popular now, especially now with the video game coming out, and that's even driving in probably more fans to come in to sport who were not fans to begin with, particularly mainly the younger crowd. It's just, it's not a good spot right now. And it's, at least in terms of behind-the-scenes stuff. Now, on the field, look, you're still going to get, good games. You're still going to have, the SEC being sort of like the NFL in terms of every single game will be a one-score game, and the ratings are good. But like people have said before, and I'll say it too, the fans don't care about the ratings. Like they're not reaping the rewards of that. The TV oligarchs are. The Mongols are reaping the rewards of that. We're not. And it's just it's not even a point where I'm getting mad anymore. It's just, well, what do you really expect here? We can complain, stomp our feet, do a protest and whatnot. It won't change anything as long as these guys are in power. And look, a lot of folks have talked about the idea of there being a commissioner, and I understand that Josh Pate has brought up him being the commissioner of college football, and I think a lot of folks take it as, oh, he's just kidding. He's not really being serious. I think he's serious, and I do believe there is a potential, and he's brought it up multiple times in a serious tone, not a sarcastic tone, that he would openly be the college football commissioner. He wants to, and I don't know. Look, I'm still a fan of Pate. I watch his show a lot, but I don't know. I don't know if even he's the answer. And look, if he ends up being the answer, eventually they really are. Folks are serious behind the scenes about having a college football commissioner at some point to take over the sport and actually govern it properly. Would he be the one to do it? I don't know. I mean, he is obviously representative of the fans, but there are, of course, other responsibilities that a commissioner does. I mean, go look at Roger Goodell for the NFL, all the things he has to do, whether it's scheduling, organizing the college football playoff, whatnot. Yes, Pate has done his own, manifesto, if you will, on what he wants college football to be, but I don't know. I just don't know if that's even the right way either. I don't even, and heck, I don't even know if a college football commissioner is the right way to go here. I think it really needs to be I don't know, like I say, group of people, right? It's a group of people that you have a representative of the fans, right? Maybe Pay could be represent that. You need someone who to, begrudgingly has to, represent the TV networks. You have people who need to represent the college football playoff, right? So if there can be at least someone who can get into the room who does represent the fans, I'll be fine with that. But having a single commissioner, I don't know, man. Look, could it work out? Sure. Again, I know a lot of folks think Pate's, joking about that. No, he's dead serious about it. Obviously, I don't know him personally, but the vibes I'm getting, he's pretty serious about it, and he is. I firmly believe he's even advocating for it behind the scenes, which is why he's having all these partners on this show and whatnot. Not to get, not to get into conspiracy theories here, but that we can do that probably after the season's over. If I remember to go into my whole theory and what Josh Pate's real intentions are here in terms of how he is really going to be the college football commissioner at some point. But yeah, I just really put it bluntly out there. Yeah, I think he's serious about it. I don't think he's joking about it. I don't think he's even said it publicly. He's said it on this show. He's like, no, I'm being serious about it. So I don't know. Yeah, the college football expansion. Look, again, it's good that they're kicking the can down the road and it's not becoming a distraction for the season. Because I guarantee you, if they made a decision yesterday or they came to some sort of a conclusion, then that would have been a massive distraction. Which is, I'm good that's not the case here. But again, we have no clarity for next year. And, I just kind of wish we didn't expand beyond 12 teams. But, that's kind of pointless now. So, like I said, when it comes to renovating anything, right? When you're renovating a building or whatnot, you don't downgrade, you upgrade, right? You can only go up. Like, why would you go down? Like that's stupid. And I agree with that. But there's some things that maybe going a little bit backwards in certain things, especially when it comes to the sports things, right? Maybe not so much other things, but when it comes to college football, at least in my opinion, I think going back to 4 would be fun with me. I know a lot of folks would hate that and be like, oh, you're, I get all that. But again, I think the urgency thing here is something that we still have right now. But my fear is if you go beyond even where we are right now, you're really ratcheting here the escalation of we're really getting just like we're not even in college sports anymore. We're really just kind of, in something completely different. So I'm hoping that's a Rubicon we don't cross over. But unfortunately, it's looking more likely that it's going to be the case here. Hoping it's not, but unfortunately, that's kind of the direction we're kind of headed, which I'm not a big fan of. But who really cares about us, right? I don't know. That's it for the show. A bit of a somber way to end the show there, but yeah, this playoff news and stuff is just. Let's just get to the games and focus on the fun stuff, right? Which is what we're doing, right? I mean, look, the season's going to be here soon. At least the games will be here soon in a few weeks. Won't be too much longer. We'll be seeing Bill Belichick and Sonny Dykes over there in Ireland. That should be a game being played in Fort Worth at ACC Carter Stadium, but whatever. That's a whole other issue of the travel and stuff, but playing the games overseas. But anyway, we'll be back on Wednesday on Thursday. We didn't do an extra pod last week. I just didn't have time to do it. I think we'll do it this week. Probably. I guess we could probably do it tomorrow. Yeah. If I remember. So that is in the cards here. So until Thursday, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Enjoy your Wednesday. Take care, and we'll see you guys on the next stream.